What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the GSN Sports Network podcast. I'm your host, John J. II. Welcome to episode 101. Thank you so much for joining me tonight on a Wednesday, the 13th of November, 2024. Wow, we're almost in 2025. Can you believe it? We're almost there. We're almost at the finish line. It's really kind of hard to believe it when you put it in perspective and you talk about it and you say it out loud because the year just flew by. Life is flying by. I say it all the time. I reiterate it every time I get the opportunity to on this show and elsewhere. Just telling the people, listen, life flies by in an instant. And if you don't stop and smell the roses, well, it's going to pass you by. So we got a hell of a show in store for you guys tonight and going to cover a lot of topics. Going to kind of go rapid fire on you tonight. Talk about a lot of different things in a lot of different areas of the sports world and in other worlds as well. So stick with us, and I'm happy to have you with us here for the entire thing. Let's jump right into it with Aaron Rodgers' experiment. So Aaron Rodgers obviously has taken up a lot of hard drive space on this podcast, on this show. And basically what we're talking about is he is the grandfather of the NFL. He's the grandfather in the area of quarterbacks in the NFL. And there was an op-ed written by Tim Cohn on ESPN.com. And he was basically explaining, what's the longevity look like for Aaron Rodgers going into 2025 and dare we say beyond. So we know with the Jets right now, obviously the departure of Robert Saleh, acquiring Devontae Adams, thinking that he was going to be the prodigal son, the chosen one, the golden child, the poster child of the NFL and for the New York Jets was going to be the saving grace for this team, bringing them forward into the rest of the season, hoping they had a glimmer of hope going into the postseason and possibly the playoffs is looking like a distant thing now. It's not looking like a possibility. It's looking like it's out of reach. And that's just the reality of the situation. He was talking on a podcast you might know about, a talk show, sports show, the Pat McAfee Show. He was asked, Aaron, hey, do you plan on playing in 2025? And is that a possibility, or is that something that is just crazy to even think about or even say? This was kind of, a lot of people going into this thought this is the last hurrah. This is the last chance at a ring for Aaron Rodgers. And he was looking into the future, thinking, hey, this is probably my last run. Maybe if I can get a ring or make a good run at a ring, then I'm going to call it after that. Doesn't look like that's going to be the case. And unfortunately, he only has one ring under his belt. He's a little bit behind the other grandfather, which has departed the NFL and now into a commentating role, that being none other than Tom Brady. He thinks he's going to come back. He thinks he's going to come back. I think I might come back in 2025. He told Pat McAfee on the Pat McAfee Show. And I was kind of amazed to hear that. I was amazed to hear that news. But at the same time, thinking about Aaron Rodgers, thinking about who he is as an athlete, as a competitor, I'm really not too surprised at all. This guy is a competitor. This guy is going to fight to the end. And yeah, he's going to bitch and moan when things don't go his way. But that's just the nature of the beast. He's essentially acquired the New York Jets as his team. He is the father of the New York Jets, making calls, making plays, and he's calling the shots over there. It's not really working out in his favor. He's basically acquired a large percentage of the old Green Bay Packers regime that he had back in the day, back in the glory days in Green Bay, and it just doesn't seem to be working out for him in New York. We've talked about it with Robert Rocco, others, members of this show, members of our community, and they seem to share the same opinions that I have as far as being surprised that he is even in the conversation to be returning and to even still be playing. He's an older guy, but we've seen it before. I think he's still more nimble than Ben Roethlisberger. I think, and you look at it, and quarterbacks really in this day and age, they're getting more nimble. They're getting more, athletic year by year. We've talked about Pat Mahomes, talked about Josh Allen. You got your Joe Burrows. There's a lot of guys that, they got to be athletic. They got to be nimble. Okay. And Lamar Jackson is another one. These guys are playing at the top of their game and they're very athletic. But then you got Jared Goff, 8-1 with the Detroit Lions, which we'll dive into them here in a little bit. And I'm going to give you my objective truth about the Detroit Lions because I can't boast myself as a Detroit Lions fan. As much as some people might assume that I want to be at this point, throw on a St. Brown jersey or a Hutchinson jersey and just go to the bar and start drinking and singing about the Honolulu Blue. As much as people might think I want to do that, I can't do it. Okay, I couldn't do it. It wouldn't be right for me to do it, especially at this point. To the victors, regards and reveres the spoils, right? I can't be a part of that squad. I can't be a part of that fan base as I've denounced the Lions in years past. And I haven't really came back to that mentality. I don't plan on doing that. Yes, I'm going to watch the Lions and I'm going to talk about them. But without getting too much off course here, talking about the nimbleness and the athleticism around the quarterback position in the NFL, it's becoming more athletic. It's becoming more nimble. It's becoming more graceful in a way. And it's always been graceful. It's always been an art position. But with Aaron Rodgers, he has to prove himself through the air raid. And if he can't do that and he can't count on his line to allow him to pass the ball effectively and not get hit, because we know he's he's basically got glass bones and paper skin. You tackle this guy the wrong way, he's done. He's done. And he's taken some hits this year. I'm surprised he's gotten up from some of them. But to hear that he's going to come back is, I guess, a breath of fresh air. This guy's not going to give up. This guy's not going to give in. And I think he's going to be broken and bent on the field. You're going to have to pick him up off the field with a spatula before he is done. And I don't see him really being done the next couple of years. And people might call me crazy for saying that, but don't be surprised if you come 2026, you see Aaron Rodgers still slinging the football. So we'll have to wait and see. But this is essentially in the making that he is still going to play. He still sees himself with a future in the NFL, probably in a New York Jets jersey. I don't see him really switching squads at this point in the game. He's going to build with this team, and he's going to grow and develop with this team. Hopefully make it through the rest of the season with some poise and try to keep his head up as much as possible, because that's all he really can do at this point. You're not really playing for position. You're not really looking for anything postseason-wise to do. So it's just kind of one of those things you got to take it with a grain of salt, and you got to move on. And if you move on and continue to play, then more power to you. Talking about fall golf. So fall golf was kind of a come and go type of thing. It's getting cold. We're kind of getting towards the end of the season now. You might get a couple more days, but I was pretty happy to get out and play Coyote Preserve out there in Fenton, Michigan. Some of you guys might have played it before. Hell of a track. I love the track. Played it with our own Sam Vitale and had a hell of a time playing out there. It was great. There's some leaves. Sam brought the leaf blower, which I thought was a great choice because the greens had some leaves, and we lost quite a few balls to the leaves, and that was expected. But it's just one of those things where you go out there and you play, you have the nice weather, you get out there and you take advantage of it if you can. That's exactly what we did, and I'm really happy we did it. It might even be possible to do it going forward into the fall, into mid-November, maybe even early December if the weather holds up, the snow holds off. But it's every day that we get here on out that is golf weather is somewhat of a long shot. So what are our takeaways looking back at the golf season in 2024? What did we grow up from? What did we get better at? And I got to be honest with you. When we played the Preserve, I did not take out my driver once. I might have taken out my 3-wood a couple times, but I was teeing off with irons pretty much every single hole. And I played pretty well. I was happy with how I played. Had to get a little bit dialed in. I had to knock the rust off a little bit. I went up and played with my dad, Paulie, out at Polecat in Mount Pleasant, another great track. Had a great weather for that too. That was mid-October, and we had a great time. A lot of good takeaways from that as well. The irons are good. We're starting to draw the ball a lot more than we ever have. Okay, my natural swing is a fade, which can leak into a slice. It has become a slice in years past, and it still happens from time to time, but my natural swing is becoming more of a draw. You got your snap hooks, which are becoming more of a prominent miss than your banana fades or your slices. So dialing it in, getting more back to center, getting back to those fundamentals. And that's what's most important about going into the offseason, is keeping that going into the offseason, being able to maintain and prosper looking at the positives that you've had from your game, and also being able to eradicate those negative aspects of your game, which can really take over, and they can manifest into somewhat of a monster going into the offseason, and they will rear their ugly heads going into the early season in 2025. So you want to be able to avoid that. Take notes, journal it, and make sure you know what you're doing wrong so you can avoid that. Stay true to your setups. Stay true to your fundamentals. Stay true to your mechanics, because that's going to be so important going into the next season. And my advice for people going into the fall season, especially living in the northern part of the U.S., get in a simulator, go to a heated range, do what you can to keep that swing nice and lubricated, because if you don't do it, you're going to get really rusty. Okay, I look at a golf swing or a golf game as something of a iron skillet. Okay, it's a cast iron skillet. If you take care of it, it'll stay nice, it'll last forever. Okay, if you don't take care of it, if you let it sit, if you get it wet and you let it sit, you don't dry it off, it's going to rust. It's going to get rusty. And then you're going to have to work even harder to get back to your baseline than you would if you just would have maintained it and kept it in good shape. So that's what I can tell you. Keep those mechanics, keep those fundamentals somewhat centered, because it's only going to help you and pay dividends going forward into subsequent seasons, and essentially even the off season too. So a lot to take away, a lot to look forward to. Looking at the world of golf, yeah, it's sad. Looking at golf, it's one of my favorite sports, if not my one and only favorite sport. It could be up there at number one. And it's really for people that either don't golf or aren't that into it. Maybe you just got a set of clubs and got out a couple times this year. The advice I'd give you is stay with it. It's a sport. It's a pastime that will stay with you, and you'll be able to take advantage of and do for the rest of your life. As long as you're healthy, athletic, nimble, and on your feet constantly, you're going to be playing it long into your old age. So stick with it and keep your head down, keep grinding, and keep working at it, because you're going to be able to play it for a long time. College basketball is back. We embark on a new season, and it's great. It's a great season because you still got college football. You got to look forward to the postseason. You got playoffs coming up. But college basketball is here. You got the early November games which have taken place, and none other than the State Farm Champions Classic, which features Duke, Kansas, Kentucky, and our very own Michigan State out of East Lansing, the alma mater. And it's a pleasure to watch Michigan State play in this classic, this event, because it's just really the marquee event. It makes you feel, okay, college basketball is back. We are so back. Okay, we're so back in a lot of ways. But as far as college basketball goes, we are so back. And it really hurts my heart. Okay, because you see a lot of turnover. You see Tom Izzo, he's been there for 100 years. Okay, and then we try to compete with a Kansas team, a number one Kansas team. And, Hunter Dickinson, makes me sick to my stomach just looking at this guy. Just looking at this guy, it really makes me sick to my stomach, and I really hate to say it, but he's really a guy that you just pisses you off to look at him. Okay, at least I might speak for myself when I say that, and I love Bill Self. I love the Kansas Jayhawks as a team, as a empire, obviously a juggernaut in the college basketball landscape. But I just hate looking at this guy. Okay, I really do. Okay, he's a cocky son of a bitch, and he just thinks he's the hottest piece of shit on the court, and it's just something about him. But forget about that for a second. Okay, the Michigan State Spartans haven't really won a game in the Champions Classic in recent history, really even in the modern era. There might be games here and there that they win, but this is always a huge mountain to climb for the Michigan State Spartans. And yeah, we're dealing with a new team. Yeah, we're dealing with a lot of new guys. Yeah, we're dealing with, fears that just came back off a gunshot wound, and got guys that are recovering and get back into positions. But please, just go out and win a game. And they had a hell of a chance to win this game last night against the number one ranked Kansas Jayhawks. And they lose 69-77. That just pisses me off, the way that they lost that game, the way they gave that game away, the way they missed shots. And I was talking to Chuck Parker, another alma mater from the yacht club next door on Hillcrest, and he was beside himself. He always gives us current state of affairs of college basketball, in specific Michigan State Spartans. The Michigan State Spartans, he speaks on college hoops, speaks on the Michigan State Spartans status. Following a game, sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad. Usually it's delivered with a GIF where it makes you feel good no matter what. But in this case, it wasn't so good. It wasn't so peppy. It wasn't so enlightening to look at, especially as a Michigan State Spartans fan. I follow college, and I've told people this too. There's certain teams or certain leagues that I take pride in watching. Okay, I take pride in college sports are at the top tier of what I follow, what I'm a fan of. I'd say I'd put the Michigan State Spartans basketball team just a notch above the football team, just because the aura, just because Tom Izzo, the history that has been made in East Lansing, the prominent teams, the shining stars that have came through, the banks of the Red Cedar. It's amazing to watch. It really is. It really is amazing seeing some of the storylines, the Cassius Winstons, the Adrian Paynes. Long live Adrian Payne. God rest his soul. But there's a lot of great eras of Michigan State basketball you can look at, as there is for Michigan State football as well. But I think with basketball, it's a little bit more of a close-knit community. It's a close-knit group where you can take a lot of pride in it. And that's where I have, it's always tugging at the heartstrings thinking about Michigan State basketball. And it's always going to be that way, okay? DK, my Twitter guy that I talk to all the time, and you want to talk about a diehard for college sports and college basketball specifically, and talking about the banks of the Red Cedar and Michigan State, that's Spartan Hoops DK. Okay, we're gonna have to get him back on the podcast just to kind of give us a perspective on what we can look forward to out of this young team that is prospering, and they have a lot of shining stars. They're going to show us a lot of success and flashes. Hopefully, not just flashes, but in some consistent runs. I'm hoping they can give us some consistent runs. You get through the Champions Classic, you get past the novelty of it, and then your season begins, okay? And then you got some other, nonchalant games before you get into conference play, but this is the beginning. So I'm hoping to see some prominence come from this Michigan State team, but there's a lot of rust that's got to be fixed. There's a lot of rust that's got to get sanded down and polished, because right now it's not it. They're missing way too many threes. I don't know if I don't even want to know what we went for three, but the ratio has got to be atrocious. Okay, it makes me sick to my stomach even just thinking about the ratio, thinking about the percentage made from three, because I guarantee you it's way under 50%. Okay, and that's putting it nicely. On the flip side of it, in the other two teams, Kentucky and Duke, they went to a barn burner. Okay, this guy Cooper Flagg that plays for Duke, he is a shining star. He's a 17-year-old freshman. He's going to be a very prominent player. Yeah, they took a bad loss. There were some learning moments for Flagg last night. But listen, both these teams are great teams, and they're going to be very prominent teams. Seeing John Calipari leave the Kentucky Wildcats sideline, I think might be a breath of fresh air for Kentucky. And, same with Duke. They got the new coach as well. So, it's a lot of building stages, but these teams both collectively, and looking at all three of these teams, Kansas, Duke, and Kentucky, they look way better than Michigan State. Michigan State almost looks like they don't even deserve to be in the Champions Classic. They used to be. They used to be a team where they had a good chance of beating anybody on the court. Now it's not so much that way. You're going to see them get pushed to the side and say, hey, we might have to get another team in here because this is a prominent event. This is an event that kicks off the college basketball season, essentially. It's game 3 for a lot of these guys. And we got to see better basketball. We got to see a better competition, because right now it's just not it. And it hasn't been that way in years past either. So I know I share some frustration with a lot of Michigan State Spartans fans, college basketball fans, etc. But we got to see more. We got to see better, because if we don't, we're going to be pushed off the edge. Right now, we're the worst team in the State Farm Champions Classic. And it's been like that for the last couple of years, like I've said. We got to fix it. We got to be better going into. I don't care if we got a young team. A lot of these guys they got 17-year-olds playing, and they're kicking ass. They're leading scorers. Okay, we got to have these prospects, these young guys coming out of high school or coming out of AAU leagues, wherever they're coming out of. And we got to see them do some damage. We got to see some cohesion. We got to see some three-pointers made in clutch moments to secure the lead and keep the lead, because that's been a struggle for this team. Not only securing the lead, but keeping the lead. And I think the latter is more important. So we'll see where it goes. But right now, it's not looking too good for Michigan State. I hope they can rebound and fix that. Looking at the NFL power rankings, we're just going to look at the top two. We're going to look at the top two teams. Number one, obviously, being the Kansas City Chiefs. But number two is the Detroit Lions. And it's all because of this guy. It's all because of this guy, Dan Campbell. Okay, we heard him back in, I believe, 2021 saying, I'm going to come out, bite some kneecaps, and we're going to take charge of this Detroit Lions team. And a lot of people were like, okay, I hear what you're saying, but I want to see it in action. I'm not going to believe anything until I see it. And until I see it, I'm not going to believe it. And a lot of people were thinking that way. And I think I already denounced the Detroit Lions back in 21. So I was really, I saw it as a breath of fresh air. I looked at it to be a great thing for Detroit. And it turned out to be exactly that. Into 2024, got heartbreak and a lot of promise going out of last season in 2023, going into early 24. A lot of promise, a lot of high hopes, and Detroit was elated. Everyone in Detroit, fans, the community, players, everybody, coaches, owners, they were all happy. They were all very much anticipating the future and what it held. And now you have it. It's 8-1. The season's not over yet. You got a lot of games to go. But this win they had against the Texans the other night was a sight to be seen. Okay, looking at Jared Goff, this man threw 5 picks. Oh, this man threw 5 picks. And we're talking about Slim Shiesty, Joe Burrow, playing the Ravens. They lose by 1 point. He threw 5 TDs. Okay, so usually if you look at this box score, you got 5 interceptions next to your quarterback. Usually you don't win the game. Okay, usually 9.9 times out of 10, you don't win the game. Okay, you just don't win the game. You don't win the game. Okay, you had a lot of players that stepped up and made it happen, especially even on the defensive side of the ball. Okay, Carlton Davis had 2 picks on defense. And I was really happy with this Detroit team. I'm not going to get too much into specifics and stats. I'm going to give you anecdotes. Okay, this Detroit team, they have poise. They have playability. They have creative ability. They have play calling. They're getting better with the play calling. I say when midline isn't working, you run the jet or you run the play action. You see the most success when you run the play action. And that is especially true for Jared Goff. You run the play action, it's almost a guaranteed 5 to 10 yards or more. Okay, the opportunity is there. Unless it gets blown up and you have a hell of a defensive play, the play action is 9 times out of 10 always there for opportunities. Okay, you could, there's a lot you can do out of it. So obviously this win being a heartbreaker for the Texans, that goes without saying. But Jake Bates, tip your cap to this guy, Jake Bates. You don't win the game if you don't have Jake Bates on your team. Okay, the hometown kid, he's from Texas, played for the Michigan Panthers, got brought up. Whoever brought him up needs a raise because he's won a couple games for Detroit this year in nail-biting moments. Okay, you're talking about a 58-yard field goal for the win after the Texans kicker misses one. And you're playing in a dome, so you're not really worried about the win. And you talk about making these field goals within a 3-inch margin of the goalpost. Come on. Does it get any better than this? No, it doesn't. It's looking like the stars are aligning for Detroit, and I'm happy for them. I really am. I can't boast, and I can't say, oh, yeah, I'm a Detroit Lions fan. Yeah, they're in my home state. But I can't brag. I can't boast about the Detroit Lions because I'm not a fan of the Detroit Lions. Yeah, I watch the Detroit Lions, and most people say, why do you got to say you're not a fan of the Detroit? We don't give a shit you're not a fan of the Detroit. I got to say it. Because I don't want to sound like a fanboy or a band, God forbid, a bandwagoner. It's the last thing I want to be. I'll never be that. I'm happy for the Detroit Lions. I want to see them prosper, make a hell of a playoff run, go to the Super Bowl, and let's see what happens. I'm happy for them, and I'm here for it. It's gonna be a ride. It's gonna be a ride. Let's talk about betting props. Okay, so as you may or may not know, depending on whether you live under a rock or not, we just had a major election here in the United States. Okay, and there's been some betting markets. Obviously, there's some that I follow that I've followed for a long time that I look at and I follow the odds. I look at the odds, see where the money's going, and one of those is Bovada. Bovada's been around since the Stone Ages, and I've been betting on Bovada way before the prominence of sports books have came to the surface and before legalities and everything came out. We were betting on offshore websites, and Bovada was at the top of the list. Okay, so Bovada, you're obviously going to be following those lines. What are some other lines? You're going to follow Kalshi. Kalshi, you can bet on the U.S. You can bet on who wins the House, who wins the Senate, who wins individual states, and also who will win the presidency, and even the popular vote. And that was probably the most important prop that I followed, was the popular vote. Okay, now Kamala Harris was massively favored. I'm talking, 70% to 30% for Trump. You're talking about a 70% chance that the Democrat wins the popular vote. Those odds flipped in real time after people believed that Trump even had a possibility of winning the popular vote, which was kind of far-fetched going into the election. But as we've seen in 2016 and in years past, if you win the election, sometimes you don't also win the popular vote. And that's why there's some controversy, and that's why the Democrats are trying to get rid of the Electoral College and just have the popular vote decide the election. And you can't really argue that it's not fair, because who has more votes? It's how every other election is decided, folks. And they're trying to do that right now in Michigan as well. So whether that's the right call or not to get rid of the Electoral College entirely is a completely different debate. That was the prop that flipped. That was the prop that really, it was a surprise. That was a long shot. If you bet Trump to win the popular vote before the election, you would have had a nice payout. I'm going to say probably plus 600 or somewhere therein, in layman's terms. But looking at the winner of the election, looking at those odds, it looked like Trump was kind of going away and taking off with the probability to win the election in weeks leading up to the election. So Shane Copeland, the CEO of POLYMARKET, is under fire. He has been raided by the FBI after the platform predicts a Trump win. And what people have to understand is these betting sites are completely determined on weight. They're determined on the amount of money put on a certain candidate. Okay, and essentially the odds are created accordingly to where the weight is or where the money is at. So to see this guy being investigated is kind of surprising to me, and to be raided by the FBI. And what's even more crazy is there's very strict laws, and I can see even more laws and regulations coming from this. And, prohibiting, and POLYMARKET in the months leading up to the election prohibited any wagers to be placed if you are a U.S. resident. So for this to be a U.S. company, wagers have to be made outside of the U.S. Kind of interesting there. And then you got Kalshi, which was, you could bet on that. And obviously Bovada being offshore, you could bet on that as well if you were living in the U.S. But to see this happen, have it be all based on weight, and you could see the amount of money, and we're talking millions, even it went into the billions on certain candidates. Trump and I believe Kamala even went up into that range leading up to the election, and you could watch them fluctuate minute by minute. I was following them, tracking them, etc. But to see the odds be skewed, and then to see the result happen as the graphs and the lines on the graph began to part ways in pretty steep fashion, it really it's not really based. It's based on the algorithm of who's putting money where, right? So to see that he called the election, that he's getting allegations against him, that he basically predicted the election. Okay, what kind of inside information do you know? The people are putting the money on these candidates. They're following trends. They're following the news. They're following everything. They're following the money, essentially. And then you got your long shot guys that probably bet on Kamala, or even in the months leading up to it where they were neck and neck. You could bet either way and essentially double your money. So we'll see what comes of this. Looks like a young guy. Hopefully he doesn't face too much heat from this. But obviously, you're taking a wave and you're following the wave. You're riding the wave. You're surfing the wave, essentially. And with this world of degenerates that we live in, it's no surprise that you would also have betting props and have the betting markets essentially take off and pride themselves on betting on elections. I mean, it's just the reality of the situation. A lot of people follow it. And as we can see, which became evident from the POLYMARKET odds, and you could see them be cited on a lot of news sites, these are what people are looking at. And that's what people are following. And that's what eventually wound up happening, which I guess is even more crazy, thinking that, POLYMARKET, and that's where the holes are at. You could say, oh, that's what people are betting their money on. They're probably betting that way too. But the difference here is these guys are betting on trends and things like that, the news, etc., but they cannot also vote if they're not U.S. residents, right? It only makes sense. So there's a little bit of fog with this. I don't know where it's going to go. It's so new where you don't even have legislation against it, against having betting markets. And if the regulations were followed where he eliminated betting from being a possibility in the U.S., then I don't see any harm here. I don't see any fouls committed. But the FBI obviously doesn't see it that way. So we'll have to see where this goes. I don't know where it's going to go from here, but it could go anywhere. Moving on, let's talk about college football. As it stands, we're looking at the first four, and it's came to light that the first four has a hell of a chance of making it to the college football playoff, now being a 12-team format. Oregon, OSU, Texas, and Penn State. This is via the Associated Press, the AP polls, which are the holy grail of a lot of things. And they kind of have the last say. And that's even true for politics, like we just talked about. They have the last say of what is truth, right? And that's even more so true for college sports and college sports rankings. The AP polls are what people follow. So these teams, they deserve to be where they're at. They've won a certain amount of games, and they feel that they can make these predictions. Yes, they can slip, and yes, they can dwindle going into the final weeks of the season. But it's looking good for these teams to at least make it. And as you can see here, 3 out of these 4 teams are in the Big Ten. So that doesn't have the writing on the wall right now that the Big Ten is a super conference, maybe even more prominent than the SEC, which the Texas is now a part of, then I don't know what to tell you. But that's what it's looking like, and that's what we can see here based on the rankings. Let's talk about the NBA Cup. So the NBA Cup, I think this is nice. I think this is cool. Okay, I don't know how you guys feel about the NBA Cup, but it's sponsored by Emirates. Okay, a big airline. They sponsor a lot of things, soccer teams, etc. And it's basically an in-season competition, in-season tournament, where I believe these games are still counted towards the overall record. But it's an in-season competition, in-season tournament. And I got to highlight the Pistons win over the Heat in overtime. Jalen Duren, you want to talk about a big-time play in a big-time moment? That's what the Detroit Pistons did against the Miami Heat. And it was a sight to see. It was a sight to see. I was excited to see it. I would love to see the Pistons make a run. The Pistons, they've kind of been, let's just be honest, they've been ass the last so many years. Really, since 2004, I really haven't seen any success out of Detroit in basketball. But we'll see what happens. Everything's decided on December 17th when everything is basically finalized. They look at rankings. They look at, the pool. And you play, you get to a knockout stage, and everything's set in stone from there. You got quarterfinals, semifinals. Quarterfinals begin on December 10th. Semis are on the 14th of December, and then the championship is on the 17th. So it's going to get hot and heavy. I believe it might be a point-based system where you get so many wins, you get so many points, and that takes you to the final rankings once everything's said and done, and then you have placement into the quarterfinals, semifinals, and that's when it becomes a bracket, right? Because not all these teams are going to make it to the quarterfinals. So we'll have to wait and see. NBA is back as well. Listen, I got to be honest with you, not a big NBA guy. I'm not a big NBA guy. I watch it, I follow it, and I enjoy games from time to time. But until the playoffs come, I'm not really watching a lot of NBA. But seeing that they got the NBA Cup, it has me interested. It has my interest. My interest is peaked. Okay, it's piqued my interest. So we'll wait and see what happens. And in just over a month's time, we will see who wins the NBA Cup. We got to talk about some gaming stuff. So for those of you guys that play video games, there's a couple of people that I know that play video games, just a couple. Okay. We got to talk about FC25. Now, I just watched a video. I actually just watched snippets of the video, got to be honest. This is my boy, Diagonal. Okay, he's an FC guru, soccer guru, really. And I talked to him here and there on Twitter, okay? And he's basically dialed in on FC25. Is it going to be better than FC24? Obviously, a ton of flaws with FC24. We're going to call it FIFA on the show because, listen, it's FIFA. It's a continuation of the FIFA franchise. Is FC25 going to be better than FC24? That question has yet to be answered. Watching just snippets of this video that I watched of Dagno talking about FC25, is it different? Is it better? There's aspects that are better, but there's also aspects that have not changed much, that have been major concerns from the player base, especially in the last cycle, looking at FC24 and now moving on to FC25. Seeing that all these bugs have not been eradicated is call for concern. Okay, now he was telling me, I don't know if I'm going to get the game. He said publicly, I don't know if I'm going to get the game because I don't know if I can trust EA with my money to have my allegiance to them when I play a soccer video game. I don't know if I can. I have other options. Obviously, EA's title, FC25, previously FIFA, is going to be at the top of the list because they've been the benchmark for football video games in years past, basically going back forever, back into the 90s. So there's aspects that are better, but aspects that haven't changed. I'm mostly inclined to know, how has the online gameplay changed? How has it, been made better? I recently started playing COD Black Ops 6, and that's obviously the newest COD title, Call of Duty, for my COD heads, my Warzone people out there. And you play the game, you play it in real time. You obviously have to have very little lag. You got to have good frames, right? Very low input lag is required. And that is the same, if not more intensified in FIFA. Every second matters. Every millisecond matters to get good touches, to get passes off, to get shots off, etc. I could go on and on. I play Black Ops, and there is no lag. It's so crisp. And I'm playing online. I'm playing with a lot of people online. We're playing on a server, obviously. But I need to have instant reaction to my action. Okay? That I haven't seen so much in FC24 and in previous FIFAs also. There's been lag. There's been input lag. There's been latency. Where I have a strong connection, I'm hardwired. I know I'm good. Okay? So when you got latency in one game, but you don't have it in another game, same specs, you're playing on the same system, same monitor, same hertz, everything. You expect to have somewhat of a, baseline of how a game should play. To see it not play how it should compared to other games, that's call for concern. That's call for controversy because that can affect the outcome. So the question remains, am I going to get this game? I haven't really decided yet. I got to do some more research. I got to watch some more gameplay. I got to see the fluidity of passes, sequences, etc. before I make my final judgment. Okay, I wasn't going to get it out upon release because I got to wait and see. And that's what I do with every game. I got to vet the game before I buy the game. And that's what I think Dagnall is doing as well. He did the 10-hour trial, which I believe they released for EA Play members on both PS5 and Xbox and probably even PC, I want to say. Might be going on a limb there, but he did the 10-hour thing and had a feel out for the game. And I don't know if he's fully convinced. The jury is still out whether or not he will buy the full game or not. So we'll have to see. Shanklin Clark. Okay, now you could say, hey, maybe it's not a shank. Maybe it wasn't a shank at the LPGA Pro-Am, but she pulled the shot. She topped the shot, and it narrowly missed the heads of spectators right on the left side of the tee box. Okay, people could have been killed. That's what people don't understand. Now, Caitlin Clark is an athlete. We got to acknowledge that. She topped the ball, went over the heads. Rumor has it, Angel Reese was on that side of the spectators. Don't know if that's true. It hasn't been confirmed. And it was a miss hit. She proceeded to re-tee. I believe the next shot was fine. But to watch this, witness this, kind of unbecoming. And people were saying, well, greatness can't be seen everywhere. You can't be great at everything. And that was said about Caitlin Clark. And she proceeded to laugh about it and whatnot. But this is put on the world stage. And people are going to make a big deal out of it. Not really a big deal. But damn, was that a bad shot. Damn. Expected better out of the Iowa Hawkeye. But listen, everybody has it happen. Snap hooks, you top the ball. Maybe you're going to need a breakfast ball. Okay, you didn't hit the range. You feel a little stiff. I had plenty of those when I went and played with Viva Vitali last week at the Preserve. So I can't say that anyone's really immune to having a bad shot or having a shank or, whatever it is, stage fright. I don't know. But it was a bad shot. And she rebounded, no pun intended, and she made the best of it. So not really newsworthy, but had to say something. Got to talk about the GSN Pro Capper. So it's the marquee fantasy football league of the Gin Sports Network. Got to just talk about it real quick. I'm looking at a team that's 4-6. Okay, I'm looking at a team that's 4-6. I'm playing 2 girlies, 1 cup. My cousin Lucas Sabatini this coming week. And listen, we're banged up. We we dealt through the Tua injury. We went through the Jordan Love injury. We brought in Sam Darnold. He got us some success, but obviously it's not where we want to be yet. Okay, we also got Chase Brown, which has been putting up some numbers for us. Jonathan Taylor has been doing well. Cortland Sutton, I got to see him really break away and become something great. Because he has the promise, he has the ability to do it. George Pickens, he's been a great asset. Acquired him off a trade, and Saquon Barkley, also another one, and Tyler Bass. He's going to be doing some great things at the kicker position. And we got Dolphins D. We picked up Dolphins D. We benched and got rid of the Saints D because I just kind of interchange the defenses. Who wants to come in and play this week? So we're looking at 4-6. And listen, the standings aren't looking too great for us. We're sitting at 7 right now out of 10. Team Ducky Booch is at number 1 at 8-2, which I believe that's Bobby Ransom. My brother Sam is at 6-4 at number 2. So you're looking at that discrepancy. You're only behind a couple games. Okay, so it's not over yet. We're not out of the woods yet. The trade deadline's coming up, so that's got to be kept in mind. But it's going to get interesting. It's going to get a little bit dicey here going into the final weeks. Who's going to make it to the playoffs? Who's going to be out? I think as of right now, I'm out. The playoff bracket has been created, and looking at week 15, that's looking like it's going to be I'm in the toilet bowl. So it's not looking too good, but we got to persevere, we got to prosper, and we got to do what we can. So we're looking at it with a positive outlook. That's all I got to say. Cool. Good deal. Awesome. Well, that brings us to the end of the show. I want to thank everybody for tuning into this episode of the GSN Podcast, looking to bring you guys a lot of content going into the latter half of the NFL season, the college football season, looking at NHL, looking at NBA, and obviously my favorite sport, college basketball. Going to bring you a lot more content with all that stuff coming up. So we're looking forward to it, and we're happy to have you guys with us. Be sure to follow us on social media. Check out all of our links at the bottom of our podcast in the description, and we will see you guys here next time on the Gin Sports Network podcast. For now, I'm John J. II. Have a great night.